The rifle shot shattered the desert silence as Cain Voss dove behind the rusted water tank, his shoulder burning where the bullet had grazed him. 3 more shots rang out, metal sparking against metal as he pressed his back against the corrugated steel. The Crimson Serpent gang had found him again, their leader's promise echoing in his mind. "You killed my brother, Voss. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Drop your weapon and come out slow." The voice belonged to Slade Raven, the most feared outlaw in the New Mexico territory. "We got you surrounded." Cain checked his ammunition for bullets left. Not enough for 6 men. He closed his eyes, preparing for what might be his final stand, when a shadow moved across the canyon wall above him. A figure crouched on the cliff's edge, and suddenly gunfire erupted from above. 2 of Slade's men dropped instantly, their cries lost in the desert wind. Who the hell? Slade's curse was cut short as another shot found its mark. The mystery shooter was a woman. Cain realized, watching her fluid movements as she repositioned herself behind a boulder. She moved like a ghost, each shot precise and deadly. Her raven-black hair caught the dying sunlight as she picked off another outlaw with clinical efficiency. "Fall back," Slade roared, but his voice carried desperation now. "Fall back." Surviving outlaws retreated toward their horses, leaving their dead behind. Cain remained motionless until the hoofbeats faded, then slowly emerged from his hiding spot. The woman was already climbing down from the cliff, her rifle slung across her shoulder with practiced ease. She was beautiful in a dangerous, way-sharp cheekbones, piercing green eyes that seemed to see through him, and scars that spoke of battles fought and survived. She wore leather pants and a fitted jacket that couldn't hide the weapons strapped to her body. "You're either very lucky or very stupid," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "Camping in serpent territory without proper cover." "I had cover," Cain replied, touching his wounded shoulder. "Just not enough firepower." She approached him with cautious steps, her hand resting on her pistol grip. "You're Cain Voss, the one who killed Diego Raven." It wasn't a question. Cain tensed, unsure if he'd traded one enemy for another. "And you are Nix Thorne." Studied his wound with professional detachment. "That needs tending before infection sets in. Why did you help me?" Something flickered in her eyes, pain perhaps, or remembrance. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted by men who won't stop until you're dead." She gestured toward a narrow canyon path. "My camp is an hour north. I have medical supplies." Cain hesitated. Trusting strangers in the wasteland was how men died. But this woman had just saved his life, and his shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just ... double quotes." She paused, vulnerability cracking her hard exterior. "Just tired of being alone out here." As they walked through the canyon, Cain noticed how she constantly scanned their surroundings, her body coiled like a spring ready to strike. Whatever she was running from, it had taught her to never truly relax. "So what's your story?" he asked. "What brings a woman with your skills to the middle of nowhere?" Nix's jaw tightened. "Same as yours, I'd imagine. Made enemies of the wrong people." "What kind of enemies?" She stopped walking and turned to face him, her green eyes blazing with remembered fury. "The kind that wear badges and hide behind the law while they destroy innocent lives." The venom in her voice told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't just running from criminals, she was running from the system itself. And judging by the way she'd handled those outlaws, she'd been running for a long time. "Sounds like we have more in common than just being hunted," Cain said. For the first time since he'd met her, Nix almost smiled. "Maybe we do." Nix's camp was a masterpiece of concealment, hidden in a cave system that nature had carved into the canyon walls. She'd constructed it like a fortress, with multiple escape routes and sight lines that covered every approach. Cain whistled low as she led him through the entrance. "How long have you been here?" he asked, noting the well-organized supplies and the comfortable sleeping area carved into the stone. 6 months. She lit a lantern, casting dancing shadows on the walls, long enough to know every rock, every hiding spot, every way in and out of this valley. She motioned for him to sit on a flat stone while she retrieved her medical kit. Her hands were steady as she cleaned his wound, but he could feel tension radiating from her, like heat from a forge. "You've done this before," he observed, watching her work. "Not too many times." She applied a clean bandage with practiced efficiency. "In my line of work, you learn field medicine fast, or you die." "What line of work was that?" Nix's hand stilled. For a moment, the only sound was the distant howl of coyotes echoing through the canyon. "I was a federal marshal," she said finally. "Thought I was one of the good ones." Kane studied her face in the lamplight. "What changed your mind?" "Found out my commanding officer was taking bribes from the Castellanos cartel. When I tried to report it, they framed me for the murders of 3 innocent farmers." Her voice turned bitter. "Claimed I was the corrupt one, that I'd been working with the cartel all along, and now I'm a ghost, officially dead according to the records. They staged my execution, but I escaped." She finished tending his wound and moved to the fire, stirring a pot of stew. "Been running ever since." "What about you? What did you do to earn Slade Raven's eternal hatred?" Kane flexed his shoulder, testing the bandage. His brother Diego was holding a family hostage in Socorro. Mother, father, 2 little girls. Local law was too scared to act, so I did. "You killed him?" "I gave him a choice. Let the family go and face justice, or die where he stood." Kane's expression hardened. He chose poorly. Nix ladled stew into 2 bowls, handing him one. "And Slade's been hunting you ever since." 3 months now. Every time I think I've lost him, he shows up again. It's like he can smell my trail." Ate in comfortable silence, the weight of their shared isolation settling between them. Outside, the desert night was alive with sounds, the rustle of small creatures, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through stone. "Why didn't you just keep running?" Nix asked eventually. "After you helped me today, I mean. You could have disappeared while I was dealing with Slade's men." Kane met her gaze across the fire. "Because for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was alone in this fight." Something shifted in her expression, a walls-down vulnerability that made her seem younger, more human. "I know that feeling." "Tell me about the family," he said gently. "The farmers, they blamed you for killing." Her hands clenched around her. "Bull, the Delgados, Miguel, Rosa, and their son Carlos. They'd been reporting cartel activity on neighboring ranches, helping us build a case. When they turned up dead, my captain claimed I'd sold them out for money. But you hadn't. I'd been protecting them. Meeting with Miguel in secret, trying to keep him safe while he gathered evidence." Tears glittered in her eyes. "Oh, I failed them. They died because I couldn't see the corruption in my own unit." Kane reached across the fire and took her hand. "You tried to do the right thing. That's more than most people would risk. The right thing got good people killed. Not doing the right thing gets good people killed too. At least you fought for them." She squeezed his hand, and he felt the calluses from years of gunfighting, the slight tremor that spoke of too many battles fought alone. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have just accepted the execution, ended it clean. Then who would have saved? Me today?" A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Maybe that's what I needed to hear." They sat holding hands across the fire, 2 broken souls finding solace in shared understanding. The desert stretched endlessly around them, full of dangers and enemies, but for this moment, they weren't alone. "Slade will come back," Kane said eventually. "Not the type to give up after one setback, I know." Nix's voice carried grim determination. "And my former captain, Marshal Briggs, he's still out there, still hunting me, still claiming I'm a dangerous fugitive. So what do we do?" She looked at him with eyes that held both fear and hope. "We do what we've been doing. We survive together." The attack came at dawn, silent and coordinated. Nix's early warning system, empty cans strung on fishing line around the canyon. Approaches barely gave them 30 seconds before the assault began. She rolled from her sleeping mat, grabbing her rifle as bullets sparked off the cave entrance. "Men," she whispered, studying the muzzle flashes. "Professional formation. This isn't Slade's usual crew." Kane peered through a crack in the rocks. "Federal marshals. I can see their badges. Briggs found me." Nix's voice was a scold. "Shh. Using official resources to hunt a woman he thinks is dead. Can we get out the back way?" "They've got it covered. See the smoke signals? They're communicating with mirrors too. This is a full military operation. A voice echoed through the canyon, amplified by a speaking trumpet. Nix Thorne, this is Marshal Briggs. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up, and we'll make this quick. Nix's laugh was bitter. Quick. Like he made it quick for the Delgados. We need a plan, Kane said, checking his weapons. How much ammunition do you have? Enough for a siege if we're smart about it. She moved to a weapons cache hidden behind. A false wall, but they'll just wait us out. They've got time and resources. What if we don't give them time? She turned to study him. What do you mean? You know this canyon better than anyone. If we could get behind them, turn the tables. The old mining tunnels, Nick said suddenly. There's a network that runs under the entire valley, collapsed in most places, but there's one passage that might still be clear. How dangerous. Probably deadly, but staying here is definitely deadly. Another voice joined Briggs on the speaking trumpet, younger and uncertain. Ma'am? If you're listening, this is Deputy Marshal Collins. I've been reviewing your case files. There are inconsistencies, things that don't add up. Briggs's voice cut off the deputy. Collins, stand down. Thorne is a convicted murderer and fugitive. She's not to be reasoned with. But, sir, the evidence is classified. Now maintain your position. Nix and Kane exchanged glances. You have an ally out there, he said. Maybe, or maybe it's a trap. She gathered essential supplies into a pack. Either way, we can't count. On it, the tunnel entrance is in the deeper cave system. We'll have to time this perfectly. They moved through the cave complex, Nix leading with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every inch of her refuge. The deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped, until their breath misted in the stale air. Here, she stopped at what looked like a solid wall, but was actually a narrow crack hidden behind a fallen stalactite. This is it. Once we're in, there's no going back. What's on the other side? If we're lucky, a position behind their lines. If we're not, ... double quotes, she shrugged. A tomb that's been waiting 100 years for occupants. They squeezed through the crack into a tunnel that barely allowed them to crawl. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ancient decay. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, water dripped with maddening regularity. Kane, Nix whispered as they navigated a particularly narrow section. If we don't make it out of here, ... we will. But if we don't, I want you to know, it didn't know, and you changed something. For the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to have something worth fighting for. He paused in the darkness, reaching back to touch her hand. Same here. You saved more than my life yesterday. They emerged from the tunnel an hour later, behind the federal position, covered in dust and grime, but alive. The marshals had established their command post in a small box canyon, confident in their superior position. Collins is the young one. With the dark hair, Nix pointed out, studying the camp through binoculars. He's the one who questioned the evidence. And Briggs, the silver-haired man by the radio. He's the one who destroyed my life. Kane studied the tactical situation. If we can get close enough to Collins, maybe we can convince him to listen. He already has doubts. It's risky. If he's loyal to Briggs, then we're no worse off than we are now. They spent the day watching, learning the marshals' patterns and routines. As evening approached, they made their move. Collins was on perimeter. Duty alone, and clearly troubled by the day's events, Nix appeared behind him like a ghost, her pistol pressed to his neck. Don't move, don't call out, and maybe we can all walk away from this alive. Collins tensed, but didn't struggle. You're Nix Thorne. I'm a woman who's been framed for murder, and you're a lawman who's smart enough to see the holes in that frame. Job. The evidence files, Collins said quietly. They're sealed under national security protocols, but I've seen enough to know something's wrong. What do you know? Kane asked, stepping into view. The ballistics don't match. The weapon that killed the Delgados wasn't Marshal Thorne's service pistol. And the timeline. She was in court testimony when the murders occurred. Then why are you here? Collins's shoulders sagged. Because I'm a junior deputy and Marshal Briggs has 40 years of service. Who's going to believe me over him? Maybe. Nix said, it's time to stop worrying about who'll believe you and start worrying about what's right. The night wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain as Collins made his choice. He slowly raised his hands, then turned to face Nix, his young face etched with determination. "If I help you, we're all dead," he said quietly. "Briggs isn't just corrupt, he's connected to people who make the Crimson Serpent gang look like Sunday school teachers." "Tell us," Kane said, keeping watch on the Marshall camp below. "The Castellanos cartel has been using federal resources to eliminate witnesses and rivals. Briggs provides intelligence, coordinates operations, even uses marshal teams for assassinations, disguised as law enforcement actions." Nix's grip tightened on her weapon. The Delgados were getting too close to exposing a major drug pipeline. Briggs arranged their elimination, then needed a scapegoat. "You were perfect a Bithabook marshal who'd been investigating the same cases. In my execution?" Collins glanced toward the camp. "Briggs needed you officially dead, but couldn't. Risk you actually dying and becoming a martyr. The plan was to fake your death, then hunt you down quietly when the attention died down. But I escaped. And now you're a loose end that threatens to expose everything." Collins pulled a small device from his belt, a digital recorder. "I've been documenting everything. Radio conversations, sealed orders, witness statements." "All here?" Kane studied the young marshal. "Why risk this? It's because I became a lawman to protect innocent people, not to help cartels murder them?" Collins's voice carried conviction beyond his years. "My father died believing in the badge. I won't dishonor that." A radio crackled in the distance. Briggs, calling for a status report. Collins keyed his own radio. "Perimeter secure, sir?" "No movement." "Good. We move at first light." Full assault on the cave system. Nix and Kane exchanged glances. "How many men does he have?" she asked. 12 total, including me. But 6 of them are cartel soldiers posing as federal deputies. The real marshals like Deputy Morrison and Marshal Santos, they don't know what's really happening. Can we trust them?"
Santos.
"Yes, Morrison. ... I'm not sure. He follows orders without question." They developed their plan quickly. Collins would create a distraction, drawing the corrupt marshals away from the honest ones. Nix and Kane would then approach Santos and Morrison with the evidence, hoping to turn them against Briggs. "What about the cartel soldiers?" Kane asked. "Fight to the death rather than face exposure," Collins warned. "No surrender, no negotiation." As dawn approached, they put their plan into motion. Collins reported a sighting of figures moving in the eastern canyon, sending half the team, including most of the cartel soldiers, to investigate. In the confusion, Nix and Kane slipped into the camp. They found Santos and Morrison by the radio. Equipment, both looking troubled by the orders they'd received. "Marshal Santos," Nix said, emerging from the shadows with her hands visible but near her weapons. "I need you to listen very carefully." Both men spun, reaching for their guns, but froze when they saw Kane's rifle trained on them. "Don't he?" said calmly. "We're not here to fight honest lawmen. You're Nix Thorne," Santos said, his weathered face showing surprise rather than hostility. "You're supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be a lot of things that aren't true." She slowly reached for Collins's recording device, including being a murderer. They played the recordings. Briggs coordinating with cartel contacts, discussing payments for services rendered, planning the elimination of witnesses. Santos's face grew darker with each revelation. "Jesus Christ," Morrison whispered. "How long has this been going on?" "Years," Nix replied. "The Delgados were just the latest victims." Santos studied the evidence with the thoroughness of a career. "Lawman, this is enough to bring down Briggs and everyone connected to him. But we need to get it to the right people. First, we need to survive the next hour," Kane pointed out. "When Collins's distraction fails, Briggs will know something's wrong." As if summoned by his words, gunfire erupted from the eastern canyon. Collins's voice crackled over the radio. "Contact. Multiple hostiles. Requesting immediate backup." "That's our cue," Santos said, checking his weapon. "Morrison, you're with me? We arrest Briggs and secure the evidence." "What about the cartel soldiers?" "I'll never surrender," Nix said grimly. "This ends in blood." They moved through the camp with tactical precision, Santos and Morrison approaching. Briggs from one direction, while Nix and Kane flanked from another. The corrupt marshal was standing by his command post, studying maps and radio reports. Marshal Briggs Santos called out, his weapon drawn. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and treason." Briggs turned slowly, his face showing no surprise. "I wondered when you'd figure it out, Santos. Took you longer than I expected."
The
"Evidence is overwhelming. Stand down." "Evidence?" Briggs laughed coldly. "You think anyone will believe the word of a dead woman and a handful of recordings that could easily be fabricated?" "Maybe not," Nick said, stepping into view. "But they'll believe the testimony of every honest marshal you've used and betrayed." Briggs's hand moved toward his weapon, but Santos was faster. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. It's already." "As hard as it can be," Briggs replied, then keyed his radio. "All units, execute Code Black. Eliminate all witnesses." The gunfire from the eastern canyon intensified, and new shots rang out from positions around the camp. The cartel soldiers were turning on their federal colleagues, following Briggs's final, desperate order. "Collins!" Nick shouted into her radio. "Fall back. The operation is compromised." Santos cuffed Briggs while Morrison coordinated with the surviving honest marshals. The battle for the canyon had begun, and the outcome would determine whether justice prevailed or corruption won another victory. The canyon erupted in chaos as cartel soldiers turned their weapons on unsuspecting federal marshals. Nix watched through binoculars as Collins dove behind a boulder, bullets sparking off the rocks around him. 3 legitimate lawmen lay motionless in the sand, victims of Briggs's betrayal. "Any hostiles?" Santos barked into his radio, coordinating. "The scattered federal forces, 6 confirmed cartel soldiers," Morrison replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. "They've got Collins pinned down in the eastern approaches." Kane studied the tactical situation. "They're trying to eliminate witnesses, but they're trapped in the canyon same as us. If we can control the high ground, ... The old mining station," Nick said suddenly. "There's a cable system that runs between the canyon walls. If we can reach it, we can get above them." Santos looked at the sheer rock faces surrounding them. "It's a suicide run." "No," Briggs said from where he sat cuffed to a radio antenna. "That's exactly what she'd try. Always thinks 3 moves ahead. That's why she survived this long." "Shut up," Morrison snapped, but his eyes remained on Nick's. "Can you make it?" "Can make it. Question is whether you can hold the camp long enough for me to get in position." "What about me?" Kane asked. "You're the best shot here. Need you providing cover fire from the southern ridge." They moved quickly, knowing the cartel soldiers were advancing on their position. Kane scaled the canyon wall with practiced ease, finding a sniper's nest among the rocks. His rifle cracked once, twice, and a distant figure tumbled from concealment. "Me too." "Down," he reported through the radio. For still active, Nix began her ascent toward the mining station, using handholds carved into the rock by long-dead miners. The cable system was 100 years old, rusted, and probably unsafe, but it was their only chance to flank the enemy position. Below, Santos and Morrison held the camp with disciplined fire, their years of training serving them well. But they were outnumbered, and the cartel soldiers were closing in. "Collins, report," Santos called, still pinned down. "You've got me surrounded on 3 sides. Can you reach the cave system?" "Negative. Too much open ground." Nix reached the mining station, a ramshackle wooden platform clinging to the canyon wall. The cable stretched across the void, swaying in the desert wind. She clipped her climbing harness to the line and began her traverse, praying the ancient supports would hold. Halfway across, gunfire erupted below her. One of the cartel soldiers had spotted her movement and was trying to pick her off. Bullets whined past her head as she slid down the cable, trusting momentum and gravity to carry her. To safety, she landed hard on the opposite platform, rolling to absorb the impact. From this position, she could see the entire enemy formation. Men moving in coordinated bounds toward the federal position. "Kane, I've got eyes on target," she whispered into her radio. "For hostiles, bearing 270 from your position," confirmed, taking the shot. His rifle boomed, and the lead cartel soldier spun and fell. The others scattered, but now they were caught between Nix's elevated position and Kane's sniper. "Fire! Collins! Move now!" Santos ordered.
Get to the cave system.
The young marshal broke cover, sprinting across open ground as Nix provided covering fire from above. A cartel soldier rose to intercept him, but Kane's bullet found its mark. First, the battle was turning, but the remaining cartel soldiers were desperate. They began advancing on the federal camp with reckless aggression, firing fully automatic weapons and throwing grenades. They're trying to destroy the evidence, Morrison realized. They'd rather die than let this get out. Not happening, Santos replied grimly. Morrison, secure the prisoner. I'm going to end this. ... The veteran marshal charged toward the enemy position, his pistol blazing. He took a bullet in the shoulder but kept moving, closing the distance until he was fighting at point-blank range. Nix rappelled down from the mining station, landing behind the last two cartel soldiers. They turned to face her, but she was already moving, her pistol tracking from target to target with deadly precision. The gunfire stopped. The canyon fell silent except for the echo of spent brass rolling across stone. Status report, Santos called, breathing heavily as he applied pressure to his wound. 4 hostiles down, Kane reported from his position. Collins is secure in the cave system. 2 more down here, Nix added. That's all of them. They regrouped at the command post, where Briggs sat with the expression of a man who'd lost everything. The evidence was intact, and 3 honest marshals had survived to testify about the conspiracy. What happens now? Collins asked, emerging from the caves. Now we do what we should have done from the beginning, Santos said. We follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter who gets hurt. The cartel connections run deep, Morrison warned. This won't end with Briggs, and we'll keep following the trail until we reach the top, Nix said. However long it takes. Santos looked at her with newfound respect. You're still officially dead, Marshal Thorne. We can fix that if you want your badge back. Nix glanced at Kane, who nodded encouragingly. I want my life back, my reputation, my purpose, and you've got it, all of it, as they prepared to transport Briggs and the evidence to federal headquarters. Kane took Nix aside. So what happens to us? He asked. You'll be a federal marshal again. I'll still be a wanted man. Not if I have anything to say about it, she replied. Your actions today helping expose this conspiracy. It counts for something. And after, when the dust settles. She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. After we see if 2 broken people can build something whole together. The sun was setting over the canyon, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in months, neither of them was running from the past. They were running toward a future. 3 weeks later, Nix stood in the federal courthouse in El Paso, watching as a parade of corrupt officials were led away in handcuffs. The investigation had spread like wildfire through the ranks, exposing a network of corruption that reached from border towns to Washington, D.C. The Castellanos cartel lost half their operational capacity overnight, Collins reported, joining her at the courtroom window. Turns out, when you remove their federal protection, they're just another criminal organization. What about the remaining cartel leaders? In custody or dead? The Mexican authorities were very cooperative once they realized we weren't protecting the traffickers anymore. Kane appeared beside them, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable on his rugged frame. The district attorney wants to see you, he told Nix. Something about your reinstatement. They walked through halls that buzzed with activity. Reporters pressed against barricades. Federal agents carried boxes of evidence, and lawyers hurried. Between courtrooms, the conspiracy had become the biggest law enforcement scandal in decades. District Attorney Helena Vance was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much injustice. She stood as they entered her office, extending a hand to Nix. Marshal Thorne, I owe you an apology on behalf of the entire justice system. I just want to get back to work, Nix replied. There's a lot of damage to repair about that. Vance gestured to chairs around her desk. We'd like to offer you a position heading up a new task force. Anti-corruption, with a focus on cartel infiltration of law enforcement. I accept. There's more. You'll have full authority to recruit your own team, set your own priorities, and investigate anyone at any level.
Vance's smile was predatory.
We're giving you the resources to make sure this never happens again. I want Collins as my deputy, Nick said immediately. Done? Anyone else? She looked at Kane, who shifted uncomfortably under the attorney's gaze. What about civilian consultants? People with specialized skills? If they can pass security clearance, yes. Then I want Kane Voss. Vance's eyebrows rose. The man who killed Diego Raven. That's complicated. Diego Raven was holding a family hostage, Kane said quietly. I gave him a choice. It. And the Crimson. Serpent Gang has been hunting you ever since. Vance studied him thoughtfully. Interesting. The gang that's been protecting cartel interests in New Mexico for the past 5 years? They're connected? Everything's connected, Mr. Voss? The question is whether you're willing to help us unravel it all? Kane looked at Nix, who nodded encouragingly. What would you need me to do? Your knowledge of outlaw networks, tracking skills, and combat experience would be valuable assets. Plus, you have a personal stake in seeing the serpents brought down. What about the charges against me?
Self-defense.
In the protection of civilians. The charges were dropped this morning. They spent the next hour discussing the new task force, its mission, and the resources at their disposal. When they finally left the courthouse, the sun was setting over the Rio Grande, as Kane said as they walked toward their hotel. Federa? Law enforcement. Think you can handle having me as a partner? I think I can handle having you as whatever you want to be, Nix replied, taking his hand. They were interrupted by a familiar voice. Well, the famous Marshall Thorne. They turned to see Slade Raven emerging from an alley, his hands held high, but his eyes burning with hatred. He was alone, his usual swagger replaced by desperate fury. I heard about your little resurrection, he continued. Figured you'd be feeling pretty proud of yourself, Slade. Kane stepped slightly in front of Nix. Walk away. It's over. It's over when I say it's over. You killed my brother, and I swore an oath on his grave. Your brother was a murderer and a coward, Nix said calmly. Got what he deserved. Slade's face twisted with rage. You think that badge makes you untouchable? You think you never finished the sentence? His hand was moving toward his gun when Kane's shot took him center mass. The outlaw leader crumpled to the ground, his weapon unfired. Jesus, Nix breathed, kneeling beside the body. It's really over. The serpents will fall apart without leadership, Kane said, holstering his weapon. Most of them were only loyal. To the Raven brothers, anyway. They stood in the gathering darkness. 2 people who'd been running from their pasts for so long, they'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but no longer defined by fear. So what now? Kane asked. We have jobs, we have each other, and we have more corrupt officials to catch than we can shake a stick at. Now we build something, Nix said, stepping into his arms. Something worth fighting for. And if more outlaws come hunting, then we'll be ready for them, together. They kissed in the fading light, to survivors who'd found something worth more than mere survival. Around them, the city hummed with life, full of criminals to catch and justice to serve. The hunt was over. The real work was just beginning, 1 year later. Nix stood on the observation deck of the federal building in Phoenix, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The anti-corruption task force had exceeded every expectation, dismantling 3 major criminal organizations and exposing corruption in 6 different agencies. The Mendoza operation is a go, Collins reported, joining her with a cup of coffee. Dee confirmed they're ready to move on the trafficking network and the political angle, 2 senators and a federal judge. The evidence is solid. Nix nodded, still amazed by how much they'd accomplished. The task force had grown from 3 people to 30, with offices in 4 states and a reputation that made corrupt officials nervous. Where's Kane? She asked. Interrogation room 3. He's working on that cartel enforcer we picked up in. Tucson Nix smiled. Kane had proven to be a natural investigator, his years of survival instincts translating perfectly to reading criminals and uncovering their lies. More importantly, he'd found purpose in the work, something that gave meaning to all the violence he'd survived. Any word from the Delgado family? Collins asked. They're doing well. Rosa started a victims advocacy group, and Carlos is studying law. Nix's voice carried satisfaction. Miguel would be proud. Think they'll come to the wedding? They insisted. Annette said they wanted to see the woman who finally brought their killers to justice find some happiness of her own. Collins grinned. Hard to believe the ice-cold Marshal Thorne is getting married. Hard to believe the scared young deputy who helped us in that canyon is now my second in command, she replied. People change, Collins, sometimes for the better. The elevator chimed and Kane emerged, looking tired but satisfied. Ramirez broke, he announced. Gave us everything: safe houses, money laundering operations, 3 more corrupt judges. Good work. Nix kissed his cheek, noting the stress lines around his eyes. When's the last time you slept? I'll sleep when we've cleaned up this mess. Mess will still be here tomorrow. We've got a wedding to plan. Kane's expression softened. About that? I was thinking we should invite Santos and Morrison. They risked everything to help us. Already on the guest list, along with half the honest federal agents in the Southwest they'd chosen to have. The ceremony at sunset in the same canyon where they'd first met, not in the caves where they'd hidden, but on the ridge where they'd made their stand together. It seemed fitting that the place where they'd found each other would be where they promised to stay together. Any regrets? Kane asked as they walked toward the parking garage. About giving up the quiet life for all this, Nix considered the question. A year ago, she'd been a ghost, hiding from her past and afraid of her future. Now she was leading the most successful anti-corruption task force in federal history, with a man she loved and work that mattered. None, she said firmly. This is who we're supposed to be, even with all the danger, the death threats, the attempts on our lives, especially because of those things. Someone has to stand up to the corruption, and we're good at it. They reached Kane's truck, a battered pickup that had seen better decades but still ran strong. Like them, it had survived everything thrown at it and kept moving forward. The Castellanos cartel put another bounty on our heads, Kane mentioned casually as they drove through the Phoenix streets. 2 million this time? Up from last month? Our success rate is making them nervous. Nix laughed. Could let them spend their money on bounties instead of bribes. They drove in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up around them. Street vendors opened their stalls, commuters hurried to work, and children walked to school, of them safer because of the work Nix and Kane did in the shadows. There's something else, Kane said as they pulled into their driveway. The adoption agency called. Nix's breath caught. They'd been trying to adopt for 6 months, but their dangerous careers made them less than ideal candidates. And they approved our application. It's a little girl in Albuquerque, 8 years old. Her parents were killed in a cartel hit. And she's been in the system for 2 years. What's her name? Esperanza? It means hope. Nix felt tears prick her eyes. After everything they'd been through, after all the death and violence and corruption they'd faced, they were going to have a chance to raise a child. To give her the safety and love she deserved. When can we meet her? She asked. Next week. After the wedding. They sat in the truck for a moment, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. A wedding, a child, a life built on something more than survival. Think we can do it? Kane asked. Raise a kid while hunting down the worst criminals in the country? I think we can do anything together, Nix replied. Besides, she's already survived the worst thing that could happen to her. We'll teach her to be strong, to fight for what's right, to never give up. And if the cartels come for us, then they'll discover what happens when you threaten our family. 3 days later, they stood on the canyon ridge as the sun set behind them, surrounded by friends and colleagues who'd become family. Santos officiated, his voice strong and sure as he spoke about love forged in fire and partnership tested by adversity. Do you, Nix Thorne, take this man to be your husband? To stand with him against all enemies? To trust him with your life and your heart? I do. Do you, Kane Voss, take this woman to be your wife? To fight beside her? To protect what you've built together? To love her through whatever comes? I do. As they kissed, sealing their vows, gunfire erupted from the canyon below. Attempt by cartel soldiers to disrupt their happiness. But the wedding guests weren't civilians. They were federal agents, marshals, and investigators who'd spent years fighting corruption. The attack was over in minutes. The would-be assassins, either dead or captured. Nix and Cain barely broke their embrace, used to danger following them everywhere. Well, Santos said, straightening his tie. That was exciting now. Where were we? You were pronouncing us husband and wife, Nix replied, laughing despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Then by the power vested in me by the great state of New Mexico, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Again. They kissed as their friends cheered, and the last of the cartel soldiers were led away in handcuffs. In the distance, coyotes howled their ancient songs, and the desert wind carried the scent of sage and promise. 1 week later, they sat in a social worker's office in Albuquerque, waiting to meet Esperanza. When the door opened and a small girl with dark hair and defiant eyes walked in, Nix knew immediately that she was meant to be their daughter. Are you? The people who catch bad guys? Esperanza asked, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. Yes, Cain replied. We are. Good. I want to learn how to do that too. Nix knelt to the girl's level, seeing her own determination reflected in those young eyes. First, we teach you how to be safe, how to be loved, how to be a kid, and then, if you still want to, we'll teach you how to fight for what's right. Esperanza considered this carefully, then nodded. Okay, but I want to learn to shoot too, like you. When you're older, Nix promised. Much older. As they walked out of the building together, a family now official and complete, Nix felt the last of her old fears fade away. She'd spent so long running from her past that she'd forgotten how to build a future. But here, with Cain's hand in hers and Esperanza chattering excitedly about her new room and her new school, she realized that the future had been building itself all along. Every choice they'd made, every stand they'd taken, every enemy they'd faced together had led to this moment. They were no longer the hunted. They were the hunters, the protectors, the ones who stood between the innocent and those who would harm. Them, and they were home. The desert stretched endlessly around them, vast and beautiful and full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, corruption still festered and criminals still plotted. But they would be ready. They would always be ready. Because some things are worth fighting for, and some people are worth fighting beside. And in the end, that's all that matters.